So although this is about Martyn's Law, it's also a bit wider than that. It's also about how you can keep your events safe, how you can make defensible decisions in your planning and preparation, and how you can keep the public, your staff and contractors safe when you're putting things together. So wait for the slides to catch up. Okay, so it's about being prepared, about being protecting your people, and it's also about being compliant with the legal duties and guidance that you've got to comply with for all your events and your buildings. So why do I do what I do? Well, 25 years experience in UK policing. I was a DI with Essex Police. We dealt with everything from risk, trauma, loss, not just to life, but also to property, reputations. It's important to understand that people make mistakes. We're all human and it's safe to make a mistake, but it's those mistakes that if you do make, you put your hands up and you're honest about it and you understand why those mistakes were made. But also I've learned that people do things deliberately, and it's those deliberate omissions, neglect, which get people in trouble, and that's when lives are lost or reputations are destroyed. But there's also a positive to it, and we did see successes. So on the back of leaving the police, I started up my own company, 1705 Consultancy, and we are a safety and security consultancy company that deals with protecting people, places and venues. And we do training, we do the consultancy side, and we help prepare the events and emergency plans. I like to call it prepare for the unexpected. You don't know what's around the corner, you don't know what's coming, and it's not just about terrorism. If you can prepare yourself for terrorism, or you can prepare yourself for an incident in the car park where someone presses the wrong pedal on an automatic car, you can get this side of the business right. So it's not about spending a fortune to get yourself prepared. Most of the companies and most of the people we speak to already have this stuff in place and already have good plans. It's just understanding that the plans you have in place can be extended to deal with the terrorism as well. And the bottom line essentially is not just about protecting the things that you know you should be protecting. It's if it does go dreadfully wrong, or you do end up yourself in an inquest or a health and safety investigation, can you honestly stand there and look a family in the eyes and know that you've done everything you possibly could to protect them? And that's essentially what it comes down to. These are humans. We're talking about humans, and that's the important bit. Can you look a family in the eyes? So a little bit about my history. So the RPU, the response side of it, and then I ended up doing counter-terrorism and the SIO about investigations. Major and critical incident commander, family liaison and family liaison coordinator, which is the bit about the families, which is really important to me. And I was the project lead for the COVID-19 pandemic for the excess death. I dealt with the public protection unit of Essex Police, and I was the project lead for immigration crime for lorries when we had the 39 victims in the back of the lorry in Tilbury. So what can you hope to get out of this today? Well, plain English, practical steps with defensible outcomes is what we all want, and that's why you do what you do, and that's why it's important that the plans you put in place before your event or during your event, you can use to defend yourself should someone come knocking on your door afterwards. So during this presentation, we'll talk about the legal duties that apply to you. It's not just Martyn's Law. There's plenty of other legislation that I'm sure you already do comply with, but do you actually understand what it is and how it applies to you, and also how to evidence it? What does good look like? And for everyone, it's going to be slightly different, depending on the scale of your event, depending on what your target audience is and how you engage with them. And just to make sure you have a plan. So I'm sure, again, when you do an event, when you do a open house or whatever it might be, you do prepare for it. You do have your emergency plans in place, but are they tested? Do your staff understand them, and will they work? Okay, so what is terrorism? terrorism, I think when we think of the word and we actually hear it on the news, we all have that gut feeling that if someone's ends up losing their life, or a bomb's gone off, or there's major inconvenience to the networks. But there is a definition of terrorism, and it's that essentially. It's the use or threat of use of anything to do with undermining the government, the public, but there must be an ideological, religious, racial, or political underscore to it, why it's happened. It must be serious violence and serious damage to property, engage in life, or serious risk to public safety. So we do hear about some of those incidents on the news, and people ask, why is it not terrorism? This must be terrorism. There is a real definition to it in law, and that essentially is where we are, and why the incident that we put also on 24 hours in custody this week around the Luton school shooting isn't terrorism. It can cause problems, but if you prepare for the unexpected, doesn't matter what it is, you should be ready and be able to deal with it. The government does have a risk assessment and a risk matrix in place for the whole of the UK. And as you'd expect, on there's things like cyber attack, mass power outage, pandemics, but also on there is terrorism. And the current UK threat level at the moment remains substantial, which means an attack is likely. And if you can perceive any sort of risk or any sort of threat to whatever it might be, you must prepare for it. And that comes under the Health and Safety Work Act as well. So this isn't just about Martyn's Law. There is a lot wider legislation in play for this. So the UK threat from terrorism has changed. We've all seen it on the news, and we've probably grown up through it with the IRA, who it was around IEDs, roadside and devices, but with warnings and letting you know it's coming. And like the video would have shown you from Al Qaeda with the 9/11 attacks with planes, through to very simple, low-level attacks where we unfortunately saw the loss of David Amis with a cheap, easy to get hold of knife. It has changed the face of terrorism. So where before you needed some skills, you needed some money, you need some research in the background, we've now gone to cheap, easy to execute, low-skilled, multi-layered attacks with no warning whatsoever. And we've seen that through vehicle penetrated attacks with mounted pavements, to firearms, to knives, and fire as a weapon is a real threat as well. So we need to consider what other attacks are likely on UK soil. So you may not know them all, but there is potentially 14 different attack types that are listed by NATSO and the Protect Group. And that's everything from postal to IEDs, firearms, marauding terrorists. So there's also drones is now featuring on there as well. The terrorism timeline, it's unlikely that someone will wake up one morning and come and attack any of your venues or your events. They would have done hostile reconnaissance prior to that attack happening. And part of your emergency plans and part of your preparation and thought process should be around, if someone's going to attack my venue, how are they going to get the information beforehand? And the likely place they're going to look, first of all, is on your website. So just have a look at your websites, have a look at your advertising. What are you sharing? How are you sharing it? And does everything you put on there need to go on there? So do you need to put a map of the car parking emergency exits on your website? Do you need to put photographs of your RVP and rendezvous points for emergency services? Do you need to put pictures of your fire exits on your web page? So just have a think of what would be useful to someone that, if they're going to attack your venue or your event, what would they want? This is real. Since March 2017, there's been 43 late-stage terrorist attacks disrupted by MI5 in the UK. So that's 43 terrorist attacks that have been stopped as a result of intelligence sharing, planning, and people intervening in reconnaissance planning stages. something that is quite scary for some of you that are doing younger charity events for younger age clients. 40% of all referrals to the Prevent scheme in 2024 were 11 to 15-year-old children. So this isn't just about the extreme terrorists that we keep told are coming on boats every day. These are children in our schools. But 75% of all the workload at the moment that MI5 have got is from the Islamic extremism. 25% or extreme right wing, just roughly. But between those, 13% of all those live incidents at the moment are under 18-year-olds. So it's a real threat. So if you've got kids hanging around your event, your buildings, don't rule them out as just children. Just keep that open mind throughout the whole of everything you do. So why do we do what we do, and why should you do what you do? You've got that moral, you've got the ethical part in the back because it's the right thing to do, and it's what you'd expect if you was going to an event with your family or your friends. You'd expect to be looked after, and you'd expect them to be doing the right thing for the right reasons. But there's also legal reasons why. So the Health and Safety at Work Act, as you all, I'm sure you know, you've got a duty to protect your employees and non-employees from foreseeable risks. And as we said, the government has said terrorism is a foreseeable risk. The threat level is substantial, so therefore it's foreseeable risk. And you must take reasonably practicable steps to keep people safe. As you can imagine, it doesn't give you an action plan of what those reasonable practicable steps are, but cost-effective, proportionate, justified decisions is where you should be aiming your planning at. So we're not talking about spending thousands and becoming Fort Knox. It's just being proportionate and understanding what we got to do to keep people safe. And with everything, there is an enforcement side of it, and there is issues if you don't comply, and that could be a criminal prosecution to you as an independent person if you're the reasonable responsible person, and also there's a risk to your organisation and your charity should you not do this, and that could be an HSE enforcement, which could be a large fine, or worst case scenario, imprisonment. Health and safety management regulations, again, it talks about you should have suitable and sufficient risk assessments in place. And as a result, terrorism is now on that list as well. So slip, trips and falls, I'm sure most people have got and are very good at writing, but now terrorism risk assessments must also form part of that plan. They also mean you've got to plan, test and brief your staff around what those plans are, what the plans entail, where they should go if there's an evacuation or evacuation. And someone's name must be accredited and associated with that risk. So it's no good just saying we've got something in place, no one knows what it is or how to find it. They need to understand what it means to them. And the Occupiers Liability Act, again, you've got a duty of care to all lawful visitors to your premises, make sure they're reasonable, safe to use. But there's a little bit in there which most people get a lump in their throat about. Some trespassers, you've got a duty of care to them as well. And what that means with regards to terrorism, I don't know, but just that's in there as well. And this talks about your escape routes, your barriers, your signs, your crowd management systems, where your fire exits are they marked? But not only just to do with fires and your normal risks that we've already been doing for years. Now it includes modern threats, so it's fair to say terrorism will come under that as well. And again, there's a civil risk, civil claims, negligence, and potential prosecution if you don't comply with that as well. And then the worst case scenario, which I hope no one ever finds themselves in, but there's gross negligence and corporate manslaughter. So should something happen and you haven't complied with any of those legislations which have been in place for years, and we should all be fully aware of, corporate manslaughter, your organisation could find themselves liable for any deaths, and there's unlimited fines applied to that. And I think most people, and especially charities, would understand that a fine of any sort of nature, it could be the end of the charity, and that's obviously not what we're about. But gross negligence manslaughter applies to individuals. So if your name is on that risk assessment, those emergency plans, and you haven't done something you should have done, or you have done something that you shouldn't have done, and as a result of that breach, death is caused, you could find yourself with a criminal conviction and imprisonment. And this underlines everything that we're talking about today. And it goes back to that, could you look a family in the eyes and know you've done something right? If you've done the risk assessment, you've done the emergency plans, and you still become a victim, as long as you can evidence and you can show the steps you took to get to where you are, then you're safe and you can sleep well at night. If you haven't, then unfortunately, this is where you're going to find yourself. So the reason we're obviously here today, Martyn's Law is the newest piece of legislation to hit the UK around terrorism. The idea of the law that was passed and got royal assent in early April this year is simply to improve the security measures in public spaces across the whole of the UK. It came around following the Manchester arena bombings. As part of the one of the victims of the Manchester bombing was Martyn. His mother, Fegan Murray, was very passionate around the inquest. She went to every day of the hearing. She sat through every single piece of evidence. She spoke to every person she possibly could around it. And a number of failures were identified during that inquest. Some of the main failures were around communication between the police. So the police on the ground around the arena itself were a different force to the police that policed the tunnel underneath the arena. The security guards within the arena didn't have any lines of communication with the police officers, either outside or underneath the arena. The fire brigade hadn't been briefed on the emergency plans that the police were running to. There was inadequate first aid equipment and first aid trained people within the arena. And the stewards who were in charge with dealing with emergencies were very unprepared, hadn't been properly briefed. And as a result, the delays to the fire brigade entering the building, delays to the police, there was panic around what was actually happening. Was it a balloon that had popped? Was it an explosion? Where the first aid equipment was? So Fegan very rightly decided that whatever had happened was wrong, and her son wasn't going to die in vain as a result of that incident. So she campaigns to the old Parliament, and Rishi Sunak actually was very passionate as well, and he agreed that this legislation was going to get through. And when the government changed and the new one took over, they continued that vein and said that we would push this legislation through Parliament. And to their word, it got royal assent in April this year. So Martyn's Law, or the Protect Duties, you might hear it referred to as, simply moves the security that's already in place from reactive, so should something happen, what do we do, to more proactive, how do we stop it happening in the first place? And it's all around public spaces within the UK where the public have access on payment or otherwise. So it applies to any public event, place, business that can hold over 200 people at the same time. It uses the wording of reasonably expected from time to time. We're waiting for guidance on what reasonably expected from time to time means, but I think if you put the normal understanding English thought process around what that actually means, I think it's pretty straightforward. It applies to pretty much every public place that you can think of, except for transport hubs, educational premises and churches. Transport hubs because they come under their own sort of legislation, they've got their own sort of protection. Educational premises, again, they've got very high security in place. Most of the schools now have fences around them, electric gates, cameras, etc. And places of worship I'm probably, if I'm honest, with suspect, because again they've got certain things in place and they've already got their bits in already in scope. However, educational premises and places of worship will always be a standard tier premises. So regardless of how many people go to those premises, whether it's 10 to 2,000, there will always be standard tier. We talk about standard tier and enhanced tier. There is two tiers to the legislation. Standard is 200 people and above. Enhanced, 800 people and above. So we're talking about some fairly large premises. There's also what they call a enhanced or a an event, and the events, a qualifying event, will be 800 people and above. There is no such thing as a standard tier event, but you could be at a standard premises or enhanced premises. So the next slide is a lot on it, and I want you to show it in this format just to show where the legislation currently sits. We're still waiting for guidance to come from the government. There's a section 27, what they call it, guidance to come out to put hopefully some of this into perspective and understand fully on what it actually means and what they're expecting. So premises, they're defining as any building, part of a building or group of buildings, or a building on other land. So for example, a pub with a beer garden, a hotel with a marquee, a school field with a marquee in it, all count as premises. Things such as racecourses, zoos, theme parks, where most of it is outside, but they're going to have some indoor parts of it, are all going to be classed as premises. So it's quite widely scoped and it is quite a large area of business. It does include shops, shopping centres, school halls, if used outside the purpose of education. So it is a wide open scope. And then events is the other side of it, but they must take place in a premises. So if you're holding one of your events in a open park and anyone can wander in off the street into the park and you've got 10,000 people at that event, that is not covered by Martyn's Law legislation at the moment. So things like Notting Hill Carnival, where you can see up to a million people over 2 days, won't be covered by this legislation. Obviously, the other bits we've talked about will cover it, but not Martyn's Law. A standard tier event, so 200 people in a premises that from time to time is expected to hold over 800 people at one time, does then become an enhanced premises or an enhanced event. So it does get confusing, and it's important to understand what you are doing and where you're doing it to understand what tier you're in. But you can't have a standard tier event. For an event, it can be on open land, so you don't need a building as such for an open event. But if you're classing it as a event, it must be secured by something like a fence, and it must be ticketed. So, for an example, Oktoberfest in Priory Park at Southend would be an event. If you would leave it a park run on the same field, the same number of people, with no fencing, no tickets, is no longer an event. So it does get confusing. It's not quite sure how that's going to fit into it. Responsible people we'll come on to shortly. And then we'll talk about the differences between standard and enhanced, what you need to do for each one of them. So the purpose of the legislation, at its very core, is simply about preventing attacks and saving lives. It's designed to ensure the venues are thought about the terrorism risks, and it simply closes a gap where before venues weren't legally required to plan for terrorist attacks, but simply now they must. And that's the bottom line of where this has come from. Any venue or event open to the public with more than 200 people is going to be in scope. So was, like we said, this could be a charity fundraiser in a hall, concert in the park, shopping centre, all across the UK. You are going to be in scope. It talks about practical measures. So this isn't about you turning your event that you normally do on a monthly basis or in the middle of the summer into a fortress, having metal detectors, dogs. This is simply about being prepared and proportionate. It's nothing more than that. So we're not talking about spending hundreds of thousands of pounds. You may already have a lot of this already in place. And like the other stuff, if you don't comply, there is a risk of a fine from the SIA, and the fine could be anything up to 5% of your global turnover or a total of £18 million. This doesn't come into place for enforcement for 24 months from April the 25th. So we're talking April 2027 before the SIA, who are going to be the regulator for this, start enforcing it. So the difference between standard and enhanced. Standard tier, 200 to just under 800 people. You must have a security risk assessment in place. You must consider and put in place proportionate terrorism risk assessment measures. So that could be simply as having people briefed in place. It could be bag searches. It could be metal detectors, depending on your event and the scale of your event and the risk that it encourages through it. Talks about basic counter-terrorism training. So again, this is simply going on to the Protect website and doing the ACTS risk assessment awareness training. It's an hour maximum online. It's free to do, and that's essentially something, the basic thing you'd need to do to comply with this. And it must be regularly reviewed. You can't just do it once and ignore it. Every event you do, you should get it out, have a look at it, and fully understand what you've got. And if your event is going to one of the SAGs, the safety advisory groups from the police, they are likely to go and ask for this. So start thinking about, what does it look like? Who's going to do it in your organisation? Who's going to do it for your events? And then when we move up to enhanced, which is your enhanced premises and your larger events, this is over 800 people. So these are quite large events in the scale of things. And again, proportionate and justified are where they're aiming this. So the wording slightly changes for your risk assessment. It's now got to be detailed and comprehensive. So it's a little bit more thought process, a little bit more understanding of where your risks are and what your mitigation is in place. You must assess the vulnerabilities of your location. So think about who you're inviting to your event. Where is it being held? What publicity around it? What's the geographical landscape of where you're holding it? What's going on in the news? Is it likely to draw attention? You must implement robust multi-layered security measures. It doesn't say what that is, doesn't say what that means, and we're waiting for some guidance around that. I suggest it's going to be your things like having tickets on the gate, bag searches if needed, potentially look for CCTV, Harris fencing. That's where your layered are. Talks about extensive training now. So we moved up from just the online stuff to a little bit more information. So training your stewards, training your guards, training your traffic management teams, what to look for, what to do, give them a proper briefing on the emergency plans. We're stepping up now to really understanding what you're trying to put in place. You've got to have regular tested drills, routines, practices, rehearsals of your plans. So it's no good just having them in place and sticking them in a drawer. Do your staff actually understand what they are, what to do, and how to do with it? And it also talks about collaboration with law enforcement, with neighbouring premises, local authority, NHS, so everyone can work together. So if the worst does happen, does everyone really understand what to do and how to do it? So it is a big step up from the standard to the enhanced. But you're not alone. The legislation talks about a responsible person who understandably, like the Health and Safety at Work Act, is responsible for your event or your premises, and their name is the one that's on top of the list. So if it goes wrong or they've got to justify their actions, they are the person they'll come to. It's no good just saying it's a X company. This is a named person, and that cannot be delegated to any contracted services. So should you get someone in to come and do some of this work for you, they cannot take the responsible person role away from you. It would come down to that person. So at the moment, if you've got a volunteer who works at the local school and the parents association who does all your risk assessments for you, do they really understand what this is? Do they understand what it means? And are they willing to put their name against it? And they've got to understand the role they're taking on if they should take it on. And then it does talk about competent person, which is very similar to the competent person in the Health and Safety Act. Competent person, different to responsible person. This is someone who has the skills and knowledge, qualifications to actually put these measures in place. So someone that actually understands what they're asking for and why they're asking for it. And this could be someone you call in to do this on your behalf. They don't have to be registered just to your company or with your company. They can have links to multiple different premises. So if you're a large national charity and you've got the luxury of having someone in that particular role, they can be trained up to be your competent person and run this part of the business for you and put these things in place. If they do this, the qualification, which will be a level 3 Ofqual qualification, which comes out hopefully next year, they can then apply to be part of the competent persons scheme, which will be run by the SIA as well. And again, that will come in next year, hopefully. But they're responsible for implementing the procedure, but don't take away the position of responsible person. So you still need someone in place to put their name against the plans that the competent person would advise you on. So the bits to remember and take out of this then are risk assessments in both cases. You must have risk assessments in place to deal with terrorism and violent crime or vehicle mitigation for your event or your place. The security measures, proportionate is the key word for this. Don't go and spend hundreds of thousands of pounds. I know it's probably a luxury again, but you don't need to spend hundreds to get yourself up. It might just be a simple bit of asking the local council to borrow their vehicle mitigation barrier to stick in front of your car park. Low cost is probably most of what you're going to need for this. Training, again, depending on the size of your events, where you're holding them, the venue you're holding them at, the free online act might be enough. If you want to go one step forward, you can do live testing scenarios, you could do desktop exercises, you could do live role play incidents, taking it all the way up. But if you're holding enhanced level events at enhanced level premises, then you're going to need to look at what your training looks like. And don't forget to collaborate. Police will happily talk to you. They'll go through this with you, more than happy. They've got counter-terrorism security advisors who will come into your premises and go through your risk assessments with you. They can't do it for everyone, so just bear that in mind if you do get knocked back, but they are there. They are a resource to be used. But don't forget to collaborate with your neighbours as well. So if you do have someone next door to you and you want to share the first aid requirements, that counts as collaboration, and it's something to consider. So the what ifs, and I always get asked what if. So I've put some of the four that I get asked the most, I think it's fair to say. So what if my event is outside? Well, if it's got no ticketing, no fences, it's likely to be out of scope. However, if it's a planned event with a large crowd, with some sort of entry system, gates, tickets, and you're over 800 people, it's going to be an enhanced tier qualifying event. So you need to put the other things in place. Remember, the larger the crowd, the more public it is, the more likely a terrorist is going to be interested in it. So just think what that means for your event, and then start planning on a larger scale. When do you have to have this done by? It does sound like a lot of work, and it does sound like it's going to take a lot of time, but you've got until 2027 essentially before the SIA start looking at taking enforcement action. But I'm not suggesting by any stretch of the imagination you wait until February 27 before you start putting this in place. Some of this may be a change of culture, some of this may be changing how you set up your events, where you hold them. So just have something in the back of your mind what that plan looks like going forward. We've talked about the training. Be proportionate to the risk you've got and where you're holding it and what your audience looks like. And if you want some advice around training or support, I'm more than happy to give you some guidance on that. And the biggest one, how much is this going to cost? The government did some cost analysis when they put this legislation through place. They suggested that for a standard tier event, any premises that's done nothing so far would be looking at around £300 to £500. Enhanced tier, potentially 1,500 to £2,000 is some of the figures I've seen. But again, most of this stuff you're likely to have in place already. So have a good look at what you've got first and then understand what the gap is. So risk assessments. What does a risk assessment for terrorism look like? Probably most of you have never seen one, don't know where to start, wouldn't know what to write in it. So just think from your site, what is likely to be your hazard? If it's inside, drones are probably not going to be your risk. CBRNs, so chemical, biological, nuclear radiation, probably not going to be a risk. But that marauding terrorist, someone coming in off the street with a knife, is probably going to be up there. So just think, how would you deal with that particular threat? Make it specific, proportionate, foreseeable to your site and for the risks you see. There's no point writing a 14-page risk assessment around a radiation attack on a church hall fate. Chances are it's never going to happen. It costs money, it takes preparation. The government have things in place to monitor the purchase of those sort of materials. So they're likely to be stopped even if they were looking at it on the radar. So keep it proportionate to what you're doing. Make sure you record the reasons why you're doing something, but most importantly, that people forget the reasons why you're not doing something. There's nothing wrong with saying we're not going to put dogs on our church hall fate, but record why you're not doing it. It's too expensive. It's not proportionate to the risk. We don't foresee it as a necessary requirement, but putting a barrier to stop a vehicle mounting the pavement might be. So just be balanced and measured both for and against the reasons you do something. And that's really important when you're doing your risk assessments, especially if you need to justify your actions later on. And turn it into action. Don't just stick it in a bottom of a drawer and say you've done it. If you're going to write something down and say you're going to do something, make sure it's done. Even if that's as simple as saying we're going to notify our volunteers where the rendezvous point is should we get evacuated. Tell them. You haven't got time should something happen. Like I tell a lot of people, you've got to survive an attack, an event for about 20 minutes. You're going to be on your own. And that's a really lonely place to be if people haven't been properly trained and you're on your own trying to make those decisions. If you've got a good team around you who are well briefed, well planned, well versed on what you expect from them, it's going to make that 20 minutes a lot less painful for you. So although we touched on it at the start, first aid was a big part that came out of the Manchester Arena bombing. And it was an issue that a lot of the victims' families raised, that the staff who were given first aid in that first 20 minutes were not properly trained, were not properly accredited, didn't have the skills needed to deal with an incident of that nature. And we hope we never find ourselves in that position, but I'm sure with all your events, you look at who's going to do your first aid and your medical cover for you. And something I just want to quickly touch on is the difference between a CQC registered provider and a non-CQC registered provider. You can probably tell the difference on paper when you get the quotes come through and one's cheaper than the other. And there's a reason for that. If they're a non-registered provider, they've got no authority to use or store controlled drugs. They're not covered by any clinical governance. They can't do blue light transports to hospitals. So you're likely to get a lesser service than you would if you use a CQC provider. And for the difference in what you get and the standards, that peace of mind, is just worth considering. So if you have got an event planned and coming up in the future, just go away and have a quick look and just double check that they're CQC registered. And if they're not, just consider whether they're the right people for your business and the right people to register, to have for your event. So both of the enhanced and standard tier events and standard and enhanced tier premises, should I say, there's certain things you must do: evacuation, lockdown, and communication plans. You're all likely to already have evacuation plans for fire, and most people understand if they hear the fire alarm to get out, and they know where the fire routes are, they know where to go, they've rehearsed it, they've practiced it. But an evacuation for terrorism may be very different to that for fire. Yes, fire could be used as a weapon, but if fire is being used as a weapon, just consider, is there another attack that we're being lined up for? Do they know that we always go into our car park, into our field, around the back of the building? So just think, is this a normal fire or is this a terrorist attack? And if so, have in place different evacuation routes for potential different attack types or different threats. Don't always just assume that your normal evacuation will be exactly the same one. So do have separate fire escape routes. And if it's a premises that you always use and you're regularly using, maybe next time you do an evacuation, plan a different route and see if people will use a different route, and maybe just educate them to do that. In your evacuation plan, make sure you have plain English what you want people to do and how you want people to do it. Give them defined roles. So a bit like you would a fire marshal, make sure they understand that your role is to get out the second floor and you're going out by either entrance 1 or entrance 2, whatever it might be for your premises or your event. And don't forget that in an evacuation, or evacuation, should I say, for any sort of terrorist incident, there's going to be mass panic, there's going to be confusion, and vulnerable people and their evacuation plans for those vulnerable people need to be included in these evacuation plans. How are you getting them out a different route? Where are you putting them? Where are you taking them? And whose job is that to do that? So they can't be forgotten. And the most important thing, if you are evacuating a building for a terrorist attack, try not to, or don't include, pushing the fire alarm as your trigger point. Try and think of a different way you could possibly do that. Activating that fire alarm is likely to go back to what they've practiced and all go out the same route that they've always done. And that might not be what you want. So there's a few points for your evacuation plan. So the next one you need to consider is INVAC. So most people have never done an evacuation, they've never considered it, they've never been part of an evacuation. But it's when the threat is outside and you want to get people indoors. It's a difficult thing to do. It creates a little bit of panic. It creates confusion. And the government guidance of run, hide, tell is essentially where you're putting this into. You're getting people indoors and hiding them away. If people want to run off and they run across a field or run across a car park, we're not chasing people, we're not dragging them back indoors. If they can get out and they can get away, let's get them out and get them away. But this is all about speed, communication, and having identified spaces, already identified where you're going to put people. There's nothing worse than getting them into a foyer and then not having the key, or you've got to undo another door to get them into a hall. Have those plans in place and think about them already. Think about secondary threats. Is someone in the building and you're taking them inside a building where the threat is? So a lot of this is multi-layered thought process. But again, nothing you already haven't thought about. Make sure if you've done an evacuation and you've got people in, you keep it locked until the police tell you it's safe to open the doors again. You don't want to be having people coming and going as they want, because that's not an evacuation. And keep people informed using plain, simple language. So in language such as, if you can, run; if not, hide; the police are on their way. Simple instructions, simple as that. And this isn't about just hiding, this is about controlled protection. Lockdown: if you're in a building and the threat is in the building with you, or it's outside and it's coming in, how do you lock down your building? If it's a key in the front door, who's got the key? Where is the key? You don't want to be finding that when seconds matter. Maybe consider putting a thumb lock on internal doors, having a key with someone that's in that office so they know that they can get that door shut if they need to. But again, how do you tell them? Have they got the confidence, the permission to activate a lockdown if needed? You don't want them to have to ring a manager or ring an event manager or event security to authorize a lockdown. They need to have the confidence and the ability to do that for themselves. This is about being quick, making quick decisions and getting the job done quickly. Once they are locked down, make sure people are turning their phones off. Try not to make noise. This is a little bit about hiding now. And again, how do you get the message out? How do you keep it controlled using plain, simple language that everyone understands and knows the importance of doing it? Lockdown, it shouldn't be underestimated, the potential emotional triggers this could cause to people. If you're instigating a lockdown and there's people outside that lockdown, they are potentially now going to be at risk from whatever that threat is. And you don't want them opening the door and bringing that threat into your building. So it's important that you understand that on the background, I guess. And this isn't about panic. This is, again, just being controlled but under pressure. So a quick tip that's worth thinking about when you're doing a lockdown, evacuation, and you need help. You've got, like I said, you've got 20 minutes where essentially you're on your own, and 20 minutes when you're on your own is a long time. But the quicker you can get help on the way, and I refer to it as the grown-ups coming to help you, the better. And the more information they've got to help you decide what they're coming and how they're doing it, again, the better. So something that's going to help you is a mnemonic called methane. And this is something that if you started going through this list with emergency services on a script as part of your policy and procedures, you're potentially going to get help a lot quicker. So is it a major incident? Although you can't declare a major incident, it's something for emergency services. If you called up and said, our event at Priory Park, I'm declaring this as a major incident, people are going to start listening and you're going to get the right people straight away listening to you. Where is the exact location? You might know Priory Park. And if you said to someone on the call taker, when dialing 999, we've got a major incident at Priory Park, where is Priory Park? Is it Priory Avenue? Is it Victoria Avenue? Is it Priory Crescent? Whereabouts in the park are you? What town are you in? You're likely to be calling a call taker that if it's busy and a lot of people are dialing 999, you're getting someone in Kent that's answering that phone call to you, or someone in London. They've never heard of Priory Park. And there might be some of you on this call that got no idea what I'm talking about. And that's my point. You've got to be exact. And if you've got a 3 words location for a gate, an area, a part of a park, that's going to be amazing. And that's exactly what they want. What is the incident? And don't mess around with the words. Tell them exactly what you've got in plain English. I've heard an explosion. There's gunshots. There's a person with a knife. A vehicle's driven into a crowd. Tell them what it is. Don't try and pretend you know what it is or guess what's going on. So don't say, oh, there might have been a crash. If a car's gone into a crowd, tell them. What are your hazards? What do you think is going on? Have you got a secondary risk? Is there a gas leak? Is there a fire? Is the attacker still on site running around still armed? Tell them exactly what you think you've got. What does the access look like for your site? Is it going to be that you've now blocked all your entries with cars parking for your event and their best access is going to be via a different route to one that you'd normally expect? Have that in your plans so you know that you want police coming in via the north entrance on what 3 words, hazard access number, whatever it might be. How many people have you got that are injured and what type of injuries are they? It doesn't have to be exact, but if you said I've got 10 people walking wounded and I've got 2 unconscious on the floor, it gives a real good indication of what they're dealing with and what resources they need to allocate here. So it doesn't have to be exact, but give them a rough idea and include this in your script. And then the E, emergency services. What do you need and how many ambulances do you think you need? Do you need the bomb squad? Do you need fire? Do you need ambulance? Tell them what you need. And to a certain extent, that will judge where they need to go and what they need to send to you. And who's going to do all this for you? So command and control is an area that I saw a lot in policing that failed. If there wasn't a clear command structure in place, chances are that's where your failures were going to be. And it's entirely up to you how you do it within your organisation, within your event. But a good system to use was a gold, silver, bronze. So gold is essentially your people that are signing your checks. They're the people that are going to be dealing with the aftermath, writing the press strategies, standing in front of the cameras, dealing with the families at inquests, having those meetings with finance afterwards. Silver are your on your ground commanders. They're your event managers. They're the heads of security. They're the heads of health and safety on the site. But have someone that's your ground silver commander, the person who's going to make the decisions and ensure they're being allocated to the right people. And then your bronze, they're your doers. So your bronzes are going to be your team leaders. They're going to be your gate supervisors, your car park supervisors, people that you can say to a bronze, I want you to come into zone A and provide first aid. So they're your doers, but have that really defined in your plans and understand who's doing what and when they're doing it. Have clarity and communication. So if you are using radios, have a radio policy in place. So understand that if you want to speak on the radio, you ask permission if it's happening, if it's something that's getting busy. Maybe have an emergency channel. So if it really does go wrong, your gold, silver and your bronzes can go onto a separate channel and get things done. They're not delaying it. They're not struggling to get it on the radio. So understand who's in charge, what's happening and who they're reporting to. JESOP is a Joint Emergency Services Interoperative Protocol. Bit of a mouthful, but essentially it means collaboration, work together. So if it's a major incident, ambulance, fire and police will have one person who will go to a JESOP meeting and they're likely to ask for someone from your event who knows it, knows the emergency plans, knows the layout, to go to that meeting with them. So make sure whoever's on your ground, and it's likely to be the silver, is aware of that, knows the plans inside out, or even has a copy with them and can take it to that meeting. We've talked about the radio discipline, and make sure those command roles are decided before something happens, because confusion can cost lives and can delay things, and all things you don't want to have in place. So on the back of today, essentially just make sure everyone goes home. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm trying to get across to you. Have a plan in place. So 30 days, just work out what tier you are, who's responsible for it, what your announcement scripts are likely to be in an emergency, and check whether your medical providers are CQC registered. If you can do that within 30 days, then you're off to a good start, and that will put into place a pretty good grounding for the next parts of the plan. So within 60 days, have your terrorism risk assessment drafted. Have a good basis of what that looks like. What are your risks? Where your risks are? What your mitigations are going to be? And from that, you can draft what your procedures look like and brief and train your teams so people can start understanding what it looks like. And if there's problems or there's issues, then they can come back to it and you can start to really look at where your gaps are and how you're going to fix it. And then within 90 days, practice it. Practice, rehearse, discuss, go through it. Make sure that you've really understood what you've put in place and what could happen if something doesn't go to plan. If you start evacuating people and the risk comes inside of you, how do you spin an evac onto its head into an evac, or vice versa? And just have that in place. And then you're likely to be called to your SAG, so your safety advisory group, and the police. If you've got all this in place, you're not going to have any problems getting your license to sign off for your event. And they're going to start asking for this. So you need to start having it in place. So my my olive branch to you, I suppose, is if you want, I can more than happily will sit with people and go through risk assessments. I'm more than happy to sit and give you some advice on what that looks like and what your emergency planning and exercises might look like. I'm also happy to test your plans if that's what you want. We can offer training. So if you do have an enhanced premises or enhanced event and you want some training, again, we can offer that for you. And if you do find that you haven't got a CQC cover, I've got some amazing partners that we work with for events, and we can offer support through CQC registered partners and through SIA registered support as well for your events, for guards if needed. And again, that's something that we can discuss if you want to. But just remember that you've got to be spot on and lucky every time. Well, they've only got to be lucky once, and you want to have the upper hand every time.